Hi, thank you, Jay. Hi, everybody. On behalf of Neve and I and Cass, welcome to the domestic violence training. It is our second training in this webinar series. We're really excited to be offering. So I know that Jay already talked to everybody present about, how to use the controls and things like that, but afterwards, we are going to be sending out a link to this training, which is being recorded, as Jay mentioned. We're going to be posting it on our new YouTube channel so that you can go back and you can review, or if you feel like there are other staff who would be interested in the training, you can forward it to them. We're also going to be sending a short post-training survey, which afterwards as well, which would really help us in guiding our future training. So please make sure that when you get that, you fill that out. We're going to restrict it to just a few questions so that you can get through it quickly. All that said, we really want to thank Stephanie for being on the call today. She's going to take us through some basics on working with a very specialized population, people who are fleeing or survivors of domestic violence. So thank you very much, Stephanie, for being here today. And I'm really looking forward to the training.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Allison. And I'm so excited to be here. The webinar is like a little bit of a new platform for me, so please forgive any kind of training panache that's lost without being in person. But I'm really excited to have such a widespread audience because oftentimes this is an issue that we're all interacting with, even if we might not know it. So when we think about the statistics that 1 in 4 women and 1 in 6 men are impacted by sexual or physical abuse in their lifetime, it's almost an impossibility that we haven't worked with people that are impacted. It's just about us knowing kind of what to look for and how to respond, because the people here at JBWS do great work with the clients that come through our door, but we need your help in order to kind of shepherd those clients into us. So I'm really excited to have the opportunity to just give people some information and tools that might be helpful to them in that process. Let me see if my slides are going to click forward. There we go. So what we're going to talk about is just kind of the definition of domestic violence so that we're all on the same page with what we're talking about, and then look at how really all of us within the community can work together to best respond to victims, survivors, people using force, children that are living in those homes, anybody impacted. I'm going to give you some quick tools for talking about this issue with clients and some places for referral or how to move forward if someone does feel comfortable to disclose about what's going on for them. So when we talk about domestic violence, I just want to take a moment to say that a lot of these phrases are interchangeable. So when I talk about domestic abuse, domestic violence, interpersonal violence, intimate partner abuse, coercive control, those are all different phrases that are getting at this same dynamic. And that is this pattern of coercive behaviors that are all about kind of gaining and maintaining control over another person. And so that often when we think about domestic violence, we think about physical violence between a married couple. And certainly that's what it looks like a lot of the time, but we know that relationships are less and less traditional in today's day and age. And really because what we're talking about is this dynamic between two people, and really specifically this pattern of behaviors. It can occur in many different types of relationships. So yes, the traditional spouse relationship, but it could also be a child caring for an elder parent. It could be two teens in a dating relationship. It could be siblings that are modeling this relationship that they see from their parents. So it's really less about who the players are and more about this dynamic, right? This pattern of behaviors, whether they be physical or economic or technological, the culmination of those really establishes where one partner is dominant and that partner has control, and the other person is really within that control and navigating abusive methods that are used to maintain that. Just want to check in really quick. Any questions so far that have come in?
No, not yet.
Okay, wonderful. So when we talk about domestic violence, it's really critical that we talk about how common it is. I already mentioned at the beginning of the session that 1 in 4 women in their lifetime will be physically or sexually assaulted by an intimate partner. We see those numbers actually rising, with a higher number for our female students before they've even graduated high school. This number really speaks to me that it's an epidemic, right? That we can't think about something so common in our society without really saying that there's something going on culturally, right, that's driving this issue. I also, just because it's October, which happens to be Domestic Violence Awareness Month, I think probably everyone on the webinar knows that it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month, right? We can't go anywhere without seeing pink and donating. And I have nothing against breast cancer research or bringing awareness to that issue, but I think most people are aware at this point, right, that that's an issue and that people should get screening. Well, the reason that we screen for breast cancer and we raise awareness for breast cancer is because it's so common and it's so dangerous. And that the earlier we intervene, the better chance that person has. And the same exact thing applies for domestic violence. We know that the earlier we intervene, the better chance someone has of being safe. We know that it is incredibly common, except 1 in 8 women face that diagnosis of breast cancer, where 1 in 4 are physically or sexually assaulted by an intimate partner. So it's twice as common, right? It's happening all around us, but we're not as on top of it, as aware of this issue as we are of others. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but what that says to me is that we need to really be working harder to identify it and respond to it, because we also in the social service field are seeing a higher percentage. 1 in 4 is the general population number. When we're looking at social service programs, clinic, medical providers, we're seeing an even higher incidence than that. Sometimes up to 50% of clients having that experience when they're going in for services. I also just want to mention quickly that sometimes we might have a group say, oh no, that doesn't happen here. And sometimes we can do that here in Morris County as well. So I just included some numbers about the prevalence. These numbers here for 2016 are the incidents that are reported to our local police departments. So we know right away that not every incident is reported. They say a little bit less than half are reported. Again, it's hard to know that that number is accurate, but let's just double these statistics. So we're looking at 4,000 incidents of DV here in Morris County every year. And those incidents, those numbers are pretty consistent year over year. So certainly it's happening. And we are only not knowing about it because we're not looking for it, I think would be the case. Also important to note that in those statistics, 85% of victims are female. Certainly, we absolutely know that male victims exist. My agency provides services to male victims. In my time where I was working in client services, I've spoken to male victims. By and large, the population that we're serving is one where females are the victims, but we don't want gender to interfere with how you see someone. So really we want to go with what someone's experiences are as the primary way to understand this issue, but just knowing that there might be certain trends with gender that come up. So my computer's freezing, but we have a lot of commonalities in some of these false beliefs that we have about domestic violence. Sorry about that. And that is because a lot of these things are really commonly believed by the clients that I've served as well. So let's start with the first two. When we say that alcohol and substance use or stress are the cause of domestic violence, really the key word there is that it's the cause. That's not the case. They're separate issues that require separate treatments. The reason that these are really commonly held beliefs is because for my clients whose abusive partners are struggling with alcohol or substance use issues, or perhaps their abusive partner is under a lot of stress, that person's experience with the abuse is much more severe. It's much more dangerous. It's much more impactful, those incidents, right? They're much more physical, they're much more violent, because if that person is someone that uses force against their partner when they're under the influence or when they're stressed out, they are likely to use more force than they would if they weren't under the influence or if they weren't stressed out. So it's a risk factor. Those things can make it more dangerous. They certainly turn the volume up on a DV incident, but they don't cause it. I would imagine that some of us on this webinar have been stressed. I would imagine that some of us have used alcohol or substances. It doesn't cause us to go home and lash out at our partners. Separate issues. The next myth that we have here is that DV only impacts low-income families. Again, here in Morris County, we're hardly poverty-stricken, but we know that it's happening here too. It affects all families, all socioeconomic brackets, all races, all religious groups, everywhere. If you spin a globe and your finger lands on green, there's domestic violence going on there. It's a widespread issue around the world, impacting all different types of families. This next piece, I think, is also really commonly misunderstood. Myself, before I got into this field, I also believed that this was an anger management issue. And that's because the abuse can look like anger in a lot of ways. The way that someone gains control might be by being angry with their partner. But someone with an anger management issue is having that issue in all arenas of their life. So when they go to a restaurant and they make their order wrong, they fly off the handle with anger. When their boss comes down on them at work, again, this uncontrollable anger. They're not able to manage it. Someone that is abusive to their partner oftentimes goes through those moments of the day where someone with an anger management problem would flip out, and they are charming and casual and don't raise any issue, but go home and choose to act that way with their partner. So it's actually the opposite of an anger management issue in that it's so controlled in this is the person that it's okay for me to take this out on. So it looks like anger. And certainly there are people that have anger management issues that are also abusive to their partners. But more than 50% of the people that are using force against their partner or being abusive to their partner at home do not have anger troubles in other areas of their lives. So it's very separate and different, although it can look to be that it's anger. And this last myth, it I think is part of how we blame victims to help us believe that it can't happen to us, right? That person had a low self-esteem and that's why they're in that kind of relationship. Certainly it can be hard to navigate this type of relationship without your self-worth taking a hit. But that's not a prerequisite. Once we look at the dynamics of violence that someone's experiencing, you may say, wow, having the person that I care about tell these things to me or say these things to me or degrade me in this way would probably eat away at how I felt about myself after time. But people with all different levels of self-esteem, all different self-worth, find themselves in this kind of relationship because it's slow and insidious. And that's to say that the abuse 18 years in is going to be much different than the way someone acts on a first date or even a year in or even 10 years in. There's lots of relationships where the first physical incident is the night that they move in together, or the wedding night, or during pregnancy, or 18 years into the marriage. So it's, it's not like on a first date, someone is like, oh, it was amazing. We had a beautiful dinner, went out to the movies, and it was just the most romantic first date black eye I've ever had. I can't wait for a second date. I'm just not worth better than that. It's very slow to start off. And so it's not that someone just doesn't value themselves enough to navigate that. Just the way that the dynamics unfold can make it hard for someone to see what's going on, or to realize that it's that person being abusive. Any comments or questions so far?
No, ma'am.
Wonderful. So this is the power and control wheel. This is how we really understand the dynamics of domestic violence. So you'll notice that power and control is at the center because that's really what it's all about. And you have physical and sexual violence on the outside. That's because those behaviors reinforce some of these other behaviors that are going on a much more consistent basis. So I'm going to start with isolation because that is often one of the first kind of types of abuse to take form. And again, it's not saying, hey, when you date me, you're not allowed to have friends or family, right? Who would buy into that? That's a hard sell. But it might be that after you go out with your friends, I fly off the handle and then blame you for going out with your friends and saying, I just love you so much. I just love you so much that I get jealous thinking about you out dancing with those chicks and all the guys you're meeting. And I just don't know what to do with this, the way I'm feeling. And if you wouldn't go out with them so often, I wouldn't have to act like this. It's just that I love you so much. So within that, not only are you kind of blaming the victim for your reaction, but you're also kind of maybe controlling who that person is talking to. Right? That you getting upset is because you love them so much and you're jealous. So maybe they shouldn't go out with those friends as much anymore. So maybe I say, okay, I don't really need to go out dancing. I'll just go out, I'll make a date to go out to dinner with them. And then when it's time to go out to dinner, my abusive partner's like, come on, babe, just stay in. We'll watch Netflix. It'll be so much better. You just saw those girls. I'm going to be thinking about all the guys you're talking to and getting jealous. Come on, just cancel on them. And so you cancel. How many times do you have to cancel before your friends stop inviting you in the first place? Right? That's isolation. And then how long do you have to go without seeing your friends before it feels awkward to talk to them about maybe some concerns you're having about your relationship? Right? If I've gone missing for the past few months because I've been off in La La Land with my new partner, and then I pop out of the woodwork to complain about that person or to reach out for support, my friends aren't maybe going to be as receptive to that. So those things, that's isolation, right? It's not this easy to point out, you're not allowed to talk to them rule. It's more elusive, and it makes it seem like the victim is making that choice so that their friends will blame them for making that choice. They think that they are responsible for the abuse, for the choices that they've made in the past, and that now they're starting to adjust their behavior to try to keep the abuse at bay. So within that, we're looking at both isolation and minimizing, denying, and blaming. And so that's often kind of some of the first components of abuse that you might see. Emotional abuse, it could be name calling, it could be really overt, but it could also be small things like, I'm so glad you changed your pants because you looked really fat in the other ones. Little things that might cut that person down. Oh, you can't get anything right, you're always messing it up. Maybe humiliating you in front of your friends. And those things, the impact of the emotional wounds is that when I look in the mirror and I see the version of myself that that person has created, there's no way to validate it and say, look what someone did to me that's wrong. Whereas a bruise is a lot easier to say, this is something that someone did wrong to me. And that's not to say that physical abuse is better or worse. I have had many clients say to me that the impact of the physical abuse wasn't as difficult for them as the impact of the emotional abuse. But it is to say that it can be difficult to know that that is abuse that you're experiencing, right? That all three of those things can be happening within the context of a relationship without it really being overt. This person's trying to control me, or this person is abusive. We also see intimidation. We're starting to kind of escalate a little bit to behaviors that are a little bit more easily identifiable as abusive. So it could be destroying property or just giving a look, right? If my partner has been physically or sexually violent in the past, and they simply give me the same look that they did when that happened, I may acquiesce to I may give them what they want just because of that look, or the fear that I feel about what may happen if I don't give them that. So intimidation carries a lot of power. It could also be something as simple as a client whose partner is a police officer, and that officer comes home and takes his gun off and places it on the table pointed at his partner and says, how was your day? Right? That's intimidating, right? When even if someone puts the gun down on the table pointed at you, that's intimidating. Do we think that person's really asking how their victim's day was? No, I think the message is, don't tell me how your day was, because don't forget, I have this weapon right here. And what I also think is important about that example is that not only does it kind of show how subtle the intimidation can be, but also if I were to go into court and say, Your Honor, I need a restraining order, I'm at risk. My partner is in law enforcement, he has weapons, and when he comes home, he puts his gun on the table and asks me how my day was. The judge is going to laugh me right out of the courtroom. He's going to say, oh, did he offer to make you dinner too? Sounds kind of nice. So there's the ability to do that while still looking like a nice guy, because of how subtle that intimidation can be when you've already established that power and control over your partner. I also want to mention the threatening to commit suicide. Also can be kind of an intimidation factor and associated with threats. That is really a very common threat, and one that sometimes we may think, oh, that person's just looking for attention, and certainly that can happen. However, what we do know is that oftentimes when someone that's using force in their relationship suggests that they're going to, if you leave me, I'm going to kill myself, what they may mean is that if you leave me, I'm going to kill the children and you and myself. We see that time and time again. The majority of murder-suicides are domestic violence related. And so if ever we're hearing someone say that their partner threatened to commit suicide, if we leave them, that's going to be a high risk factor. And we'll talk more about high risk factors later, but that is definitely one not to ignore. Economic abuse, also very common, especially here in Morris County. And this could look a lot of ways, but it could be convincing someone to be a stay-at-home parent and then making them beg for money for, food for their child while simultaneously chastising them for not contributing, setting up barriers if they do want to return to work, harassing that person at work to get them fired, really kind of limiting that access to financial support, because we know that financial reasons are one of the main ways that someone can get kind of stuck in this kind of relationship. And then this last wedge, using male privilege, I also, and I can send out this additional power and control wheel, it's really using any status or privilege. So traditionally in the women's movement where domestic violence kind of originated, yes, all these ideas about male privilege still apply, right? This master of the castle, this is a man's role, this is a woman's role. However, it could be any status. It could be perhaps a trans person in a relationship with a cisgender person, and that cis person is using their status against that person, calling that person it, or threatening to out them at work. It could be immigration status, right? If one partner is documented and the other person is not, it could be, oh, well, if you call the cops on me, they're going to take you away. So it can be any kind of differential power and status. This just happens to be the original kind of version of it with looking at male privilege. Any questions so far about just the different ways that power and control can be established in a relationship?
Looks like we don't have any questions so far, Stephanie. Thanks.
Wonderful. So, oftentimes after we get really depressed thinking about all these different types of abuse that someone is experiencing at the hands of an intimate partner, at the hands of someone that cares about them, one of the questions that I always get asked, one of the questions that I am guilty of asking before I really came into this field is, well, why would someone stay with someone that's doing those things to them? Doesn't make sense. And, there's a lot of really good answers to that question, but I want to first start by saying it's the wrong question to ask for a few reasons. One is that it kind of assumes that everyone's on this level playing field and people aren't facing different forms of oppression as they navigate this relationship, right? So not everyone has equal economic opportunities. Perhaps someone has a different ability and that impacts the way that they navigate this relationship. So it is kind of ignorant to the fact that everybody has a different scenario that they're navigating. It also is the wrong question to ask because it very much blames the victim. And so let's reframe this. So let's say on your way to work, every day in your office parking lot, you were assaulted. Every day, you're assaulted in the parking lot on the way to work. And would we ask you, well, why do you keep going to work? Why wouldn't you just quit your job? Why wouldn't you just stop going, right? Because that's so silly, right? If someone is attacking me every day in the parking lot on the way to the work, cops are going to be like, we need to find this person and hold them accountable. But if when I go home, the abuse happens there, then somehow it's my fault and I'm choosing to stay, and I must like it or something, right? So it just it's blaming the victim. The real question is, why does this person's partner feel the need to control them? Why are they willing to be abusive in order to gain that control? Those are the real questions. That's really how we're going to end this issue, because certainly, let's say victims didn't stay and every person that was in this kind of relationship got free, their partners don't stop having relationships. So helping people navigate this kind of relationship and get free from it, if that's what they want to do, yes, wonderful, helpful. But that doesn't end domestic violence, because the person that's being abused isn't the problem. They're not the one causing it. It's the person that's using those behaviors that's the problem, right? Why does that person do that? That being said, there are a lot of really good answers to this question, and I consider them really more of barriers to leaving or to understanding your situation, not as like reasons that someone is staying. And the first one is fear. And that fear is real and valid. The majority of domestic violence homicides occur after the victim has left. So leaving doesn't equal safety. In fact, leaving equals additional danger. And so that fear is real, right? People should be afraid, because fear is our way of our brains telling us that there's danger, right? And there is real danger for these victims because it's about power and control. So if I leave my partner, I'm saying I'm taking the control back, right? You're not going to be around me anymore. Because when we look at this, almost all of these factors get taken away if I leave that partner, right? So they're losing control. There's a real loss of control there. And when we want to have control and we're losing it, we escalate. That is a normal, real life response to what we do when we're seeking power. So let me give you an example. If you're in a room with a small child and they're going to stick their finger in the electrical socket, you're going to say, kid, don't do that. And if they ignore you and continue to go to put their finger in the socket, you're going to get up, you're going to walk across the room, you're going to take their hands, you're going to say, hey, don't do that. That is an escalation to gain power and control. A safe one, a healthy one, but it is an example of that is what we do, right? We escalate when we want to keep that power and control in order to get it. Just like if I'm in a rainstorm and I have an umbrella and a big gust of wind comes, I hold my umbrella tighter to keep it from blowing away. I'm escalating the force that I'm using in order to maintain control. So when we apply that to a very dangerous and volatile, abusive situation, and someone's tools for maintaining power and control are taken away, they're going to escalate. And so often, physical violence, showing up, stalking someone, are some of the only tools that they have left. Just last year in Morris Plains, a young woman had broken up with her partner. They worked together. He waited outside her home. When she arrived home, he gunned her down. And when the police arrived, he ran across the street and took his own life. She had left him, right? She, according to many people on paper, did what she was supposed to do. And that didn't save her, because there are vulnerabilities, right? There is going to be escalation when someone leaves. So we can't ignore that real life situation that leaving is going to put them in more danger. We also know that children, shared custody is always going to be the case. Not always, but for the majority of situations, there will be shared custody. And so you may have a parent whose children are having panic attacks when it's time to go to the abusive partner's home. And they have to take their kids to that person's home, or else they're going to be in contempt. So I've had clients say, you know, I'm an adult. I can take it. I don't know what's happening when my child is there alone. But I'm going to go back, because at least then I'll be there and I can be the one that's taking it on, because I'm the adult and I can protect my children from that. I've seen clients whose kids have begged them to leave, and the same client's children begged her to go back. But really, the majority of my clients identify their children as their reason to leave, their reason to stay. That really most things that survivors are doing are in efforts to protect their children. It's just a very difficult situation to navigate. We also know that survivors are facing a terrible situation financially. It's difficult to live in this state, and especially this county, with 2 incomes, let alone just one. So it can be really a challenge to start over and be managing children and trying to find a new job and trying to find housing. It is one of the main hurdles for survivors that are looking to get free. We also know that people's families or religious leaders might say, well, that's just what marriage is. This is, you know, your cross to bear. This is, you know, you just have to be better. You have to try harder. And that those things can have a real impact on, you know, who that person talks to about it. If those are the first people that they tell about it, it might be a really long time before they bring it up to anybody else again. I also, in my work with clients, have seen clients at all different ends of the spectrum in understanding their relationship, how they feel about their relationship, what they see as their options are for moving forward. And a lot of the time, clients that are just starting to realize that what they're experiencing is abuse and that there are some dangers in the home. I've had a lot of clients say, Steph, I love this person. We have a home and a wonderful family together. And, you know, they say it's not going to happen again. They said that they're going to change. And all I want in this world is just the life that I've created for myself and my family, just without abuse. And I don't think that that is a tall order or too much to ask. It probably isn't going to happen, but it's not wrong for people to want that, for people to give their best chance to keeping their family as a whole, to working on that partnership to see if they can resolve it. It might not happen, but we can't blame somebody for wanting that, right? It's not too much to ask. Or for when someone's saying it's never going to happen again, right? To want to believe that person. And then we look at the other end of the spectrum, and part of the reason that I made the change from direct service to doing training in the community is because I was 23 years old when I had a client say to me, Steph, I would have left 18 years ago if I had just known that there was someplace to go. And that really broke my heart, because that was my entire life. My entire life, this person had known that their partner wasn't going to change, had really moved forward with knowing that they wanted to exit. They just didn't know how to do that safely, didn't know that there was a place to go. And that is where we need you all, because people at JBWS are doing amazing work, but without kind of spreading awareness of this issue and the resources that are available to help families navigate it, we are such a shortened reach. And so if you all in the community are able to be aware, right, be informed enough that you can say, hey, this to me says domestic violence. I'm concerned. I'm going to have a conversation with that family. I'm going to let them know that I care about them and that I see it. that is really the opportunity that we have to keep families safe and to give everyone the information that they need to navigate it at whatever pace is right for them. So again, to this idea of hurdles, right, barriers to leaving, you know, I can hike up a mountain, long distance, but if you put hurdles along the way and tell me I have to jump over them, I'm going to fall on my face, right? I'm going to quit and cry. If you tell me I have to run and sprint and go at somebody else's speed, I'm not going to make it either. But if we can remove those hurdles and walk with someone at their own speed as they navigate that journey, then they're going to make the journey that's right for them, right? Because it has to be, and everyone's is different, it has to be what their journey is. And not every journey is leaving that partner, again, because it's not always safe, right? That's not always the right answer for everybody, but it is an option for people, and it might be one they're interested in if some of these barriers were removed. Any questions on just the dynamics and definition of DV before I switch into the screening and assessment portion?
Not so far.
Wonderful. Okay, so I already kind of covered a lot of this, but we really need to be asking about it, because this is an issue that has a lot of stigma, that is very underreported, and really just people are afraid to talk about it. So if we ask about it, it kind of sets the tone that it's safe and okay to talk about in that space. And just like sexual abuse, it's not something that people offer up, but oftentimes when we're asking, people are willing to share. I also want to put forth the idea that just asking is an intervention. And that seems, people are probably like, that's a little bit far-fetched stuff. Like, what do you mean by that? And what I mean is that even if the person that you are sitting with isn't ready to admit it to themselves, or isn't ready to say it out loud, or doesn't really know what's going on, or knows how dangerous it is and doesn't want to talk about it, you asking sends a lot of messages. It says, I see it. It says, it's not okay. It says, you can talk to me if you want to. And if we're asking in some of the ways that I'm going to set forth this afternoon, we're also educating that the things that we're asking about are considered abusive and that those behaviors themselves aren't okay. So no matter what, asking is helpful, right? Because we're planting a seed. We're planting a seed that something that we witnessed isn't okay. Seeds don't grow instantaneously. You don't plant an acorn and close your eyes and then there's a huge oak tree. That's not the way it works. Not every seed grows into a tree, but if we plant a seed and nurture it, then it has a chance. So that's how we want to think about talking to someone about their abusive relationship is that we have the opportunity to just plant those seeds, that the things that they're experiencing aren't okay, and that there are people that want to help. And I know, asking about this stuff can be a challenge, and what we've seen from all different types of professionals is that it can take a lot of time, right? You can really open up a can of worms or Pandora's box by asking some of these questions. Maybe people don't feel informed enough to really go down that avenue. So that's number one, why I'm thankful to have this opportunity this afternoon. But my agency is happy to come out to your local organizations and train staff on this same topics that we're training today, so that everyone can feel comfortable with responding. Because really everyone has an opportunity to really be that branch for somebody in a bad situation. So when we are looking at screening clients for domestic violence, I would really encourage people to make this a part of their regular intake process, or something that they're asking every client. And that is because you never know when someone's going to be ready to talk about it, and you never know who might be experiencing it. So to include it in your general kind of intake paperwork, to be something that you're following up on throughout sessions, really gives you the best chance of connecting with someone about the issue. So when I say confidentiality, that obviously is going to be different for every program. The links to which you're able to provide confidentiality, I would encourage you to. If you can provide confidentiality from the person that is using force against them, if you can, whatever ways that you're able to let them know that you're not going to be passing this information on to the police or whoever, is going to be helpful in them feeling comfortable sharing with you. When I say normalize the situation, I don't mean, yeah, of course your partner hits you. Everybody's partner hits them. I hope you didn't think that I meant that. But what I mean is to say, I find that so many of my clients have been experiencing abuse in the home that I really ask everybody about it now, right? To normalize it in that way, that this is something that's happening. So if you want to talk about it with me, you can, because I'm used to talking about it, because it's something that happens a lot. You also want to make sure that you are talking to people alone. Certainly you don't want to be asking someone about their experiences in front of the person that you think might be hurting them. Definitely won't be safe for them to answer in that way. So you want to get people in as private and safe of a space as you can. Definitely don't want to be using any friends or family to serve as interpreters. I know my agency, if we don't have staff that speaks the language of the client, we'll use the translation line. Again, everyone has their own kind of parameters and things that they're restricted to within their agencies. I would just encourage you to explore and see what your options are, so that you can be best connecting someone to someone in their own language. And when I say use multiple questions which reflect various forms of abuse, I am thinking back to the power and control wheel, right? So, does your partner get jealous a lot? Do they try to control your behaviors because they're jealous? Are you allowed to have access to the bank account information? Does your partner ever call you names? Are you afraid of your partner? Have they ever, hurt you? Have they ever destroyed your property? So looking at this can give you some fuel for where to get your questions from, because if you're asking questions that speak to these behaviors, you're also then educating that person that these behaviors are not okay. I also want to say that I think the most important principle in screening is our attitude as the provider. And what I mean by that is that sometimes it might seem obvious to us that someone is in an abusive relationship, right? So let's say they have two black eyes and they say, oh, I tripped and I fell and I hit a double doorknob, and that's where these black eyes came from. And as providers, we're like, that doesn't make any sense. Clearly, this person is being hurt by somebody, even if it seems obvious to us, even if it is wildly unrealistic that that person's explanation is what happened. We need to remind ourselves that they don't owe us the truth. I think sometimes in our provider role, we can get frustrated with people because we feel like they're withholding information or maybe not necessarily being truthful. And when we are talking to clients about their potential abusive experiences at home, I want us to really first and foremost just get rid of that idea that someone owes it to us just because we've asked. We are certainly not owed anything, right? If I asked you all to type into the question box your most intimate, private, potentially shameful and embarrassing situation, maybe something that you haven't told anybody, people aren't like chomping at the bit to do that just because I've asked. Even if I'm doing it to help you, it's not owed to us. So when we are screening someone, we're asking people these questions to also give them that space that whether or not they're ready to talk about it, we're still doing our job by asking, planting seeds, letting them know that we care, letting them know that it's not okay. But when we judge them for not maybe saying it out loud or disclosing to us just because we've asked, we're then putting in a barrier for them to be able to maybe talk about it next time they see us when they are ready. So even if it seems obvious to you and you ask about it and you do the best job ever of making the safest, most comfortable space for someone to share this, it's on them. It's their story to share or not share. And we need to really just let them be in that space. I think probably most of us can identify with the idea that sometimes saying something out loud makes it real. And maybe sometimes we know something deep down and we just don't want to say it out loud because that makes it more real. Maybe that's where the space the client's in, right? Maybe they know, but they're just not ready to say it out loud. And to just give them the respect to navigate it in that way. If we are respectful to their wishes of sharing or not sharing and continue to engage with them in an open, comfortable, respectful way every time we work with that person, then eventually we can earn the trust so that when they are ready to talk about it, we're on the list of people that they would maybe be willing to talk about it with. These are just some example screening questions. Again, you can use specific observations if someone has a bruise or if you cited a specific behavior that was concerning to you. Certainly, I noticed that you have a bruise on your arm that looks like fingerprints. Did someone hurt you, right? And to ask a lot of different questions that speak to an experience, because it's much easier to identify with an experience, right? Has my partner ever called me names? No. Do I ever feel afraid or intimidated? Ooh, yes. Has your partner ever threatened to harm you? Yes. That it's easier to identify with those experiences versus if I say, are you a victim of domestic violence? Like, oh, now that's my identity and maybe I don't even know what that means. So when we're asking about it, we really want to go to those behaviors because it's easier to align with these experiences than this idea of my identity is that of a victim. Any questions so far, screening wise? Okay, wonderful. So
sorry, my phone muted me. No question.
Okay, great. So when we are screening, those are really just kind of like yes or no questions to try to get to connect with the experience that someone has had. These assessment questions are more to get a better understanding of someone's experience once they've said yes. So we know that not every abusive relationship is the same. And so two people could both have been hit, punched with a closed fist by their partner and have wildly different experiences as a whole and have wildly different levels of danger that they're in. So when we're talking to someone and we do the best possible job of creating this safe space for them to talk about what's going on for them, and they are also in a space where they're ready to talk about it and they say, yes, my partner has hit me, well, then we can start to look at, I want to get a better kind of understanding. So instead of just a snapshot, I want to get the video, right? All this other information about what's going on with these incidents and in this relationship so that I can have a better understanding of how dangerous it might be. So the first incident, the worst incident, how often we're experiencing incidents, those things can really help us paint a picture. So if the first incident was this one that just happened, and I've never experienced physical abuse before, it's going to be very different than if the first incident was 12 years ago and the worst incident was a couple weeks ago when I lost consciousness. And it used to be once a month that I've been experiencing violence, but really lately it's been twice a week, right? Those people are in very different situations. And so the assessment piece is how we can get a better understanding of what's going on for them. This piece at the bottom, have you had contact with any other agency regarding the abuse? That is not the most important thing to ask, but it definitely helps us understand what has been going on for this person as far as their own thinking about the relationship. So if you're the very first person I've ever told, number one, bravo for a good job for setting a safe space, but also it shows you how closely I've kept that secret. It might indicate that I've had some shame about it, or I'm fearful to talk to other people in my life about it. Or if I tell you, yes, I called the police and they showed up and had him take a walk around the block, and when he came back in, I got it twice as bad, so I don't call the police anymore. Also going to give you a lot of information about what's been going on for me in this relationship. A lot of my clients have spoken about the fact that navigating the abuse is awful. And part of that hurt is that the person that's abusing them is supposed to be someone that loves and cares about them. And that more hurtful than that is when they've spoken to a friend or a family member about the abuse, and that person has not believed them or minimized it or said, he's a really great guy, you need to lower their standards. Those things are identified as more hurtful. So if someone said, yeah, I told my mom, but she said that that's just the way marriage is, well, it makes sense maybe why she hasn't told anybody else about that experience. When we look at risk assessment, my agency, JBWS, has someone called a danger assessment and safety planning specialist. This person, really their main job is assessing cases for high risk behaviors. We use something called the DV risk assessment that is developed by Dr. Jacqueline Campbell. And this looks at factors that, in examining hundreds of domestic violence homicide cases, she said there has to be something we're missing. There have to have been things going on in these families, in these relationships, that are a clue to us as providers that it's dangerous and that things are escalating quickly.
And Stephanie, one of the questions that we just got is along those lines, is whether or not in those screening questions there are any ways of helping to identify patterns of coercive control and emotional abuse that may lead to or be associated with the physical abuse. So I don't know if that's where you're headed, but I just wanted to put it out there.
I wasn't headed there, but I'll make sure I get to that.
Thanks.
So when we're looking at these really kind of like higher risk factors that we're associating with lethality, I'm just going to go through a list of them, and I don't expect people to memorize this list, but to try to get as familiar as you can with it, not because we expect people to be doing those risk assessments, but so that when you are talking to clients, and I do believe that people will have success in screening and talking to clients about it because you have a relationship, you have a rapport. People generally want to talk about it when they're asked about it. That if you hear about some of these higher risk behaviors, those are just indicators to you, kind of like little light bulbs going off that say, okay, I'm really concerned about this case. I maybe want to be really, really just heavily showing my concern with this client about kind of encouraging them to connect to JBWS or some support services. So high risk factors are abuse during pregnancy, strangulation, which would be talked about by the client as choking, abuse of pets, threats to harm children, threats to commit suicide or homicide. The pattern and impact of abuse, that's what I was mentioning before with kind of looking at it increasing at a higher, kind of escalating in frequency and severity. And then some exacerbating factors could be mental health issues, substance abuse issues, access to weapons, change in the relationship status. We also see recent loss. If my abusive partner recently lost a parent or recently lost their job, we also see a higher risk of lethality with that. So some things to kind of keep in mind and be aware of as we're speaking to clients, that those things are going to indicate to us, okay, it's really imperative that I'm doing everything I can to try to connect this person to services. So you were asking about how to screen for some of the coercive behaviors and emotional abuse. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, you know, as opposed to, like you were saying, asking about specific, you know, maybe physical behaviors or identifying signs, specifically maybe the coercive pieces that may not have directly resulted in something more easily identifiable.
Sure. So I would ask a lot about emotional abuse, right? Does your partner put you down? Do they call you names? Does that person make you feel bad about yourself? Does that person make you feel guilty about choices that you've made? Do they humiliate you in public? Are you allowed to say no, right? Are you allowed to have boundaries? What happens when you try to say what is important for you or what you need? How does that person respond to that? We also I've often used the power and control wheel as a tool. And what I can do is I can send over a handout that one side is the power and control wheel and the other side is the healthy relationships wheel. And in a conversation, I have even showed kind of both sides of that and said, you know, every relationship has different dynamics. When you look at these two wheels, you know, which one sounds more like your relationship? And that way that person's reading and taking all that information in. And again, they don't have to disclose if they're not ready, but they're still getting the information about what that coercion or what that abuse might look like. Does that answer that person's question?
I think so. I think that, you know, anything that you could provide that would be, you know, kind of guiding someone to maybe understand what to ask and associate those factors more strongly. So like you said, that handout, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah. So it's just, you know, you can ask about every single thing on this power and control wheel to see what, you know, what fits for someone. And really,
sure.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and I was going to say the questioner had a follow-up, which is, you know, kind of ancillary, but is with regard to if you are asking questions in that line and you do find, you know, that there is, you know, abuse going on, what
For a couple reasons. First of all, it helps me as a provider when someone is being avoidant or angry and rageful or numbing or being helpless, or maybe has a difficulty concentrating or loss of interest and motivation. Those things aren't necessarily the most fun to be around. They can be challenged to work with. So I like this image for myself and reminding myself that this is part of someone's experience. These are the things that they take on to protect themselves from additional trauma. So it helps me take a step back as a provider to meet someone where they're at and remind myself that this is a a symptom of what's happened to them and not something that's wrong with them. I've also used it with clients who are experiencing these things and are relieved to say, oh my gosh, this is normal for someone that's been traumatized to experience this. Wow, I thought something was just wrong with me. So a really powerful image, both for someone that's kind of going through these things and doesn't understand it, but also for those of us working with people going through these things and trying to navigate the challenges that go along with that. Also, on the left side here, it says lying. Yes, sometimes people can alter what's going on when they're reporting stuff to us just to keep themselves safe. However, it's also important to know that the way that memory is impacted by trauma can often change the way that they're able to then report that to us. And so when someone's narration of a traumatic memory changes from the first to the second to the fourth time that we talk to them about it, to not automatically go to that place that they're lying, but really more see it as perhaps this is just an impact of the trauma. So to go to this idea of you guys are not DV providers, it's not on you to kind of provide these trauma-specific services. What we're hoping is that this webinar has given you information to increase your awareness of how to identify it and respond. And really the most important thing to do is to connect that person to services. So you always want to let that person know that the abuse isn't their fault. You can validate that it's scary and confusing and that they might have feelings that conflict with each other, that they're not alone. This is a really common issue all around the world and here in Morris County. And then to give them information and resources, right? So connecting them to an agency like JBWS, letting them know that there are people that have information that can help them. There are people that want to help them on this journey if they're interested in that. And to be patient and compassionate, right? Even, excuse me, even if when I'm there in the office with you and I disclose that this is what's going on for me, that doesn't mean that I'm going to want to just pick up and leave my home because we talked about the fact that I'm experiencing violence. It's a big decision and one that is most successful when that person takes it seriously and does really a lot of planning and is mindful in how to navigate that. So we can't assume or expect that just because we've identified that this issue is going on, that person's gonna be like, all right, bring me to shelter, I'm ready. It's the same as when you're talking to someone about a substance abuse issue or weight loss or any of the other things that people might be thinking about making changes with in their lives. It doesn't happen overnight. It's not one magic conversation that changes everything. Think about the fact that those barriers to leaving or navigating this kind of relationship still exist. So to be a support to them and be with them on that journey, but to not expect, you know, oh, I came in, we talked about it, time to change your whole life. That's really not necessarily going to happen. And so these are our local resources. The 24-hour helpline, that is a resource for anyone that cares about a person in a DV relationship, is working with a person in a DV relationship, is in one, used to be in one. So that helpline is for anybody. And I talk to professionals that cared just as often as I talk to clients and survivors themselves when I was answering the helpline. So please, please, please feel free to use that yourselves as you're working with clients and as you are trying to navigate these conversations. Know that that we're here to be a support to you as well. We have residential programming for people who aren't safe to stay in their own home, but we also have a lot of programs for people that are living in the community and maybe just want to come in and find out about their options and resources. Maybe they want to get some support in a group setting. So our Morris Family Justice Center is a really cool walk-in center that is 4 Court Street in downtown Morristown, in the building where the prosecutor's office is. They take walk-ins Monday through Friday, 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. And someone can go in and meet with a variety of different services, whether they want to understand their rights and options regarding family law, or they want to understand their criminal law rights and options, do a needs assessment, understand the programs and services that JBWS has, all of those things all under one roof. Our community counseling program is a support group program for people that are living in the community. And so a lot of people in that group are still in their abusive relationship and are trying to navigate it and come in just for some emotional support and processing in regards to that. Jersey Center for Nonviolence is our programs for people that are using force in their relationships because, like I said, those people are the cause of the problem. So to really end domestic violence, we need to work to reframe the issue for people that are being abusive, because those people are really the cause of the problem. The Dating Abuse Prevention Program goes into our local high schools and provides education about healthy relationships for teens. The Community Education Program and professional training is what I do. I'm more than happy to come out to anyone's local agency. If you work with kids, I can come provide a session on the impact on children. If you work in a medical setting, I can tailor it to that. So really, we are happy to come out and help any professional that's interested in learning how to respond, training on how to do that. Also special topics like strangulation, and there's a whole list of our training topics on jbws.org for anyone that is interested in enhancing their skill set even more from here.
And Stephanie, we had one question, just a clarification. Did you say or specify that JBWS staff will come out to meet with a potential client if they're fearful that going to the Family Justice Center or JBWS would alert their partner?
So there's no need for someone to be fearful of JBWS or the Family Justice Center alerting their partner. All of our services are confidential and free. Our program for people that are...
I think the question is more along like if there's like a stalking or something where people don't know, if they're fearing that it will get back to their partner even if it's not they're not notified specifically. That was, I think, the nature of the question.
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't have the staff to really be able to do that. But certainly, okay. If you are with someone that is fearful of that, they can contact our helpline from your phone and look at options that way and do some safety planning around how they might be able to get connected to services safely.
Okay. All right. We don't have any other questions currently in the queue, but if anybody did have something else they want to ask Stephanie, now would be the time to put it in there. Otherwise, what I'm also going to do is open up the line again for Allison to either wrap us up or at least to thank our presenter. Allison, are you there?
Yeah, I am here. Thank you, Jay, for hosting the webinar. Thank you, Stephanie, for the presentation, really informational. I know that we are going to be planning on having Stephanie come back early next year and do a few other trainings for us. So so thank you. We're looking forward to working with you more in the future. So if anybody has any questions and they weren't able to be addressed, again, we're going to be sending out a survey. We'll send out Stephanie's contact information, and we'll also be sending out a link for the presentation. Our next webinar is going to be in November on the topic of LGBTQ. So hopefully y'all come back for that one as well. Thank you again.
All right. Yes, Stephanie, thank you so much. Really appreciate your help and for adapting to our technologies and doing a fine job. Everyone, thanks for coming, and we'll provide the attendance list to Allison so that she knows who was there, and everybody should be able to get the information from her and from Neve. All right? Thanks, everyone. Take care. Have a beautiful day.